Welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations, your authority in navigating the world of homeschooling diverse learners. Featuring Peggy Ployhar from SPED Homeschool, Annie Yorty from AnnieYorty.com, Leilani Melendez from Living with Eve, Stephanie Buckwalter from eLARP Learning, and Dawn Jackson from Dawn Jackson Educational Consulting and Tutoring. With over 75 years of combined homeschooling expertise, experiences, and perspectives, this group is eager to share their wealth of wisdom to empower your homeschooling journey. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and get ready for insightful discussions, valuable insights, and practical tips. Give your homeschool the power boost it needs to successfully educate the unique learners in your home.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about playing to thrive, building essential skills for today's world. And my guest today is Alan Tang. Alan is career journey has been anything but ordinary. After spending 6 years in corporate finance within the renewable energy field, Alan shifted gears and dove into the world of hospitality, cooking in some of London's top restaurants. Seeking more balance, he launched a consultancy to help startups grow and scale, serving as a fractional chief of staff while continuing his passions for private catering. In 2021, Alan discovered his love for education, working with Synthesis before founding CoLab, an innovative online program that uses games, discussions, and escape rooms to teach kids essential skills for the modern world. Now, Alan dedicates his time to creating unforgettable learning experiences for kids. Welcome to the show, Alan. I'm excited to have you join us.
Peggy, thank you so much for having me. I am a huge fan. I just finished listening to your episode with Chad Stewart about nurturing creativity and consider me inspired.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I have so many good guests on, and you are one. Just helping our parents to understand that there's so much beyond what we consider education or learning that help our kids to just grow and develop skills that they're going to use throughout their lives. And we kind of forget that sometimes when we get caught up in the mundane of we just have to do this today. And I remember being in that place when I'm like, oh, another day of school, let's just get through those books and be done. But having that bigger picture of, these are essential skills that we are using and conveying to our kids that is preparing them for their futures. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And what better way to do that than to play? And so I'm really excited about this topic and what you have to share on it, and how can you can inspire all of us. I see we have quite a few viewers popping on and watching. If you have questions or comments about just preparing your kids for the future, how to incorporate play, that's what we're talking about today. Definitely put them in the comments, the questions, or just say where you're watching from. We would love to know. So Alan, one of the things that I ask my guests usually when they first come on is just sharing a little bit about their journey and why they're passionate about the topic we're speaking on, which of course today is building essential skills for today's learners, and especially incorporating play into that.
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, like you said, my background's not in education. I fell into it. I was this chief of staff at different startups, and by some fluke, I ended up getting approached for a company called Synthesis, which is the Elon Musk online school. And their concept was really cool. It was all about using games to teach kids communication skills, leadership skills, teamwork skills. And I thought the idea is cool, but how would it work in practice? Because I went through a traditional education system, and it was always rote learning, exams, rarely through playing. And it completely changed my mind. I was coaching there for I think 2 months, and then I got invited to a tournament, and I was facilitating this tournament. And I remember this very well. It's the last round of this tournament, and one of the young girls in the group was nominated to be a team leader. And she's 8 years old. and she had the self-awareness and confidence to say, thank you for nominating me, but I'm not the right person for this round. I'm going to nominate Alex to be the team leader. And they ended up winning the tournament. And just to have that confidence, that self-awareness, that articulation to say that under pressure,
Right.
it blew my mind. And I thought, wow, there's something here. And I really loved it. And it was at that point that I started thinking, okay, there's more to education. Education can be really, really powerful. And I remember distinctly at this point, I read a stat that I think 67% of the public think that the traditional education system just doesn't teach kids the skills they need to succeed in life, which is incredibly
Mm,
scary in itself. And then you read
right.
all these stats about literacy rates falling, truancy rates increasing, and it makes you think something's missing, something's not quite working for our young people. And it was that kind of drove me towards this route down education, learning everything I could about it, reading a load of books, and eventually ending up starting CoLab.
Oh, that's really cool. Yes. It's amazing how just, experiences in our lives lead us to completely repivot. And it's that 8-year-old girl and her decision and just how much that affected you. That's really cool that yes. Um, that it, and yeah, kids kids just I know the kids that I work with, they make such a difference in my heart, because it's not something that we're like forcing them to do. It's like they just know, and it shows just their uh, I'm sorry, my brain is I'm still getting better from my cold. I can't think. Um, but I'll maybe come back to that thought. Kimberly is watching and she said, yes, play is powerful. I agree, Kimberly. Um, but what I was thinking was, just the innocence of their decisions, and yet how authentic they are. Um, in those, and that it makes it more impactful to us because there's no coercion on their side usually when they do things like that. And I'm sure the same for this girl, not thinking that that she was ready for this, but knowing that somebody else was, and not trying to just play the game to 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 try to prove something. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to sort of piggyback on that idea, I think I like to talk about student agency and just when the students are engaged in something, they want to do something, that learning becomes so much easier because they're invested in the topic. I know for myself, I learned to speak Cantonese. I learned to think strategically. I learned how to solve problems by playing a game called Legend of Zelda. And you
Ah,
might
yes.
think it's a computer game. How much could you learn? But I learned so much from that. And because I wanted to do it, it became second nature to me. And I didn't need to be coerced into doing it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. You just you desire to, and therefore there's just so much research involved with just how much your brain activates more when you want to do
Mhm.
something, and all those things. So yeah, it totally makes sense. And yes, my kids are big gamers, so I know that game. um, so we're talking about playing to thrive. How does that idea of capture just this approach when equipping students with essential skills? Where's the crossover in play to skills?
I think when you're the sort of like the holy grail of learning is where you're enjoying it and you're in that flow state, but you're also learning at the same time. And I think we just touched upon this about student agency, but there's so much anecdotal evidence from Montessori schools,
Mm,
Peter Gray's
right.
book about free to learn, that when you're playing and like you said, it's your brain is able to absorb so much more information and actually it becomes second nature to you. You see a lot of young people now playing Roblox and Minecraft and learning a lot of quite complex things and
Right.
developing these skills through play. And it's interesting for me because I find that most adults I meet, they don't have this playfulness anymore. And I don't know about you, Peggy, but I end up gravitating towards people who have retained it because
Mm,
they're full of life and they make you want to be curious, to ask questions, to try things out.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's really difficult, right, to encourage this sort of environment because when you're learning, and typically in a traditional learning environment, there's always some sort of monitoring, some sort of grading, some sort of results-based approach, and there are
Hmm.
consequences to that. It's quite high stakes. So it just means that you're always a bit hesitant to try something new, to
That's true.
experiment. But when you're in a playground or you're learning to snowboard or you're learning to try a new skill, you're not you don't mind being judged, and actually you want that feedback so you can improve and learn. And that's where it just happens.
Yeah, never thought about it that way. But yes, it's more exploratory versus judgmental.
Hmm.
And so you have that ability to try and to kind of fail and yet continue to improve. So that yes, it kind of takes all of the restrictions away and it's just like, well, let's just give this a try instead. And so I see that as and you're right about adults that have lost that ability to kind of just let loose and to try something or to to go on um a jungle gym when they're maybe too old to do that. But
You're never too old to
yeah,
do a jungle gym.
no, you never.
But I would say that, especially if you're a young person listening to this, you should try and experiment because there are no consequences really.
Hmm.
As adults, we have mortgages and we have jobs and we can't try as much. But when you're a young person or you're doing one of these online programs, experiment as much as you like because there are no nothing. What's the worst that could happen? I remember back in the day, I played this game called RuneScape, and some of your listeners might remember it. I got scammed. I was so naive, and I gave my password out to an admin. The person wasn't an admin, and he hacked into my account, took all my stuff, and I logged back in. I had nothing, and from that point on, I never gave out personal information to someone I didn't know or validated. And it's a really valuable lesson I've learned without it costing me anything.
Right, right. Because had you not learned that then, you you could have possibly fallen prey for some way worse things.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I talk about that a lot is, letting our kids fail even at our homes, because they're safe places for them to fail
Hmm.
and because when they get out into the world, we don't want to have their barriers so protective that they just kind of just slide off and do anything they feel like doing, once they get out of our homes, because they don't have any internal barriers built in to where they need to stop.
Hmm.
So, because we aren't going to be with them the rest of their lives, whether you think we are or not. But yeah, so very true. Um, th- Also, what about like as parents and modeling? What can we intentionally do, other than maybe just being a little more curious ourselves or getting on that jungle gym to inspire our kids to maybe um, take this approach and be more playful, especially if we haven't been in the past, just to start changing that mode in our homes.
I mean, you know this better than me, Peggy, but young people learn from those that they look up to and they often mimic their behaviors. I know that as I
Mm.
grow older, I'm starting to show a lot of the characteristics that my dad had, um, for good or for worse. But I think that's very true. And I think that actually we have to start modeling this behavior if we want our kids to also do that. Otherwise, you're kind of being a hypocrite, right? You're not doing what you preach.
Right.
And I think it's sometimes it's quite hard, but actually, if we want to showcase them, then we kind of have to. I mean, if you just to give you an example, right? So in our classes at CoLab, I often hope that something goes wrong, in the sense that
Uh,
when something goes wrong, I can model to the kids, this is how you deal with stress, this is how you communicate under pressure, this is how you
hmm.
manage your emotions. And I think that I almost wish for those situations to happen so that I can show it in a very authentic way. And I think, going back to your question, it's just about being intentional. Have it in the back of your mind that I need to showcase how to act in a certain situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I always found, at first as a parent, I found those really frustrating moments. But then I started realizing that those were teachable moments and I should embrace them because they were opportunities that
Mhm.
kind of put you at the center of something that was pivotal for your child. And so you had to embrace that learning environment right there and then, and take the lesson from there. And so yes, that is so true. It's those things that do go wrong and aren't the way you plan them, and because that's the way life goes, and it isn't like it goes step by step like a book. There's things that pop in and happen.
And I think if you look at the skills that we're trying to model, they're not skills that are necessarily taught in schools or taught in traditional education systems, right? So I
Right.
don't know if you've seen the World Economic Forum's recent report. It highlights resilience, empathy, curiosity as these top 10 skills that employers look for. And they're often undervalued skills by society. They call them soft skills when actually they're durable
Right.
skills. Um, I think that, emotional intelligence is one of them. It's a super important skill. And I actually value it as an employer more than IQ, more than intellect. But it's also a skill that can be developed. And it's all about practice, right? So when I work with young people now, I set the tone that it's a peer-to-peer conversation. I'm not here as a superior. I'm not here as, you know, an elder. I'm coming in, we're equal, and I will always ask for feedback on the coaching session, feedback on the session, feedback on the class, because that way I'm practicing what I'm preaching. And then what I notice is that the young people start to mimic that. They start asking for feedback, and it's a two-way conversation there, which is really powerful. I think the other thing that we as adults can do is to create moments of reflection, because reflecting is actually such a key part of learning, and it's often something that we don't do. For me, every Friday, without fail, at 4 p.m., I will write down things that went well this week, things that didn't go so well this week, and I'll think back, what could I have done differently? Using that
Mm.
Socratic questioning to ask those questions, to reflect on those moments. We could do the same with our young people.
Yes, yeah, yeah. So you talked about emotional intelligence. Can you explain to our parents just why that's so important, and then also what is emotional intelligence?
Emotional intelligence is the ability to control your internal emotions, right? And what the reason I think it's so important is that people often don't really necessarily remember what you did, but they remember how you acted in that moment.
Ah,
So you think back
mhm,
to a conversation, a dispute, an argument, it's always about the tone, the emotional charge in that conversation. No one really remembers what you did. And
mhm,
I think that if you can manage that, you often will be more successful in life, not just at work, but also in your personal relationships. And when you talk
mhm,
to leadership coaches, the majority of them don't focus on your technical skills. They focus on the way you communicate. I
mm,
think the technique they use is called non-violent communication. And they focus on the tools you can use to regulate your own emotions, whether it's breathing, mindfulness, whatever it is, it's such a powerful tool. And I find that especially in this day and age where everything's quite distant, we're having conversations over Zoom, or we're not meeting in person, just having that human element, I think just makes us
mhm.
better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we have to see beyond people as an object and as another person, and somebody that has, yeah, feelings and emotions and a life that we don't see all of that, and to be willing to consider all of that, beyond just an interaction and or a couple words exchanged. And that it takes a lot of understanding and willingness to go outside yourself, and that's becoming harder and harder in our society, as you said, because we deal in such bits of information versus kind of holistically like we used to when we would spend lots of time together and invest in relationships, which we don't anymore. And so yes, that can definitely be something that's of high value, because it is something that just we don't see a lot of.
But it's
So
a skill that you can practice though, Peggy, I think. So one of the things that we built at CoLab was this escape room, right, where 10 kids in a dungeon and they need to escape together. And we intentionally built these guards in this room that if they catch you, they send you back to the beginning of the challenge. And it's quite interesting to watch it because, you know, the rule that we apply to the game is that if you get caught, all of you have to get caught and you get sent back to the start. And when it happens 5, 10 times, it's fine. Imagine it happens 20 times and it's just Alan sending you back to the start. How are you going to have those conversations? How are you going to manage your emotions? I think it's about experiencing it firsthand. You need to have that in order to learn this skill, and doing it in a risk-free environment, which there are no consequences, I think is really important.
yeah, and I love that whole group kind of scenario and team building environment. So can you talk a little bit more about teams and just doing things with other people, and just that kind of corporate play, and how that is also can lead to just some skills that our kids need to work on and grow with, and also can benefit from?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as an employer myself, the key skills that I care about are your ability to work with others, your desire to learn, and your ability to learn. I think a lot of the other skills I can teach you, and I don't think that's just me. The World Economic Forum's report does say teamwork, leadership, emotional intelligence, communication skills, critical thinking. They're all skills that are valued not just by employers, but also by people right? You want to be surrounded by people who have those attributes. And so I think it's a really powerful skill, and it's also a really hard skill to learn. I think, like I said, in this increasingly digital, remote, AI-driven world, just being able to work with others and practice that skill is becoming rarer and rarer. But it's also the skill that I value the most. I think that, if you think about entrepreneurship, it's often described as quite a lonely journey. And I know a lot of young people these days want to be entrepreneurs, but you can't do everything yourself, and you also don't necessarily have the skills to do everything yourself. So if that's the case, you have to be able to work with someone else. You have to be able to bounce off others. And the best way to do that is to experience it, join a club, join a program, do activities that foster this skill. And I think it's really useful to do it outside of people that you know as well, because when disagreements happen, you have to learn how to deal with those emotions, but you also get that real-time feedback from someone who doesn't know you. And you can start to think, okay, there are consequences of acting like this. Okay, I have to do this. I've actually found, Peggy, that board games like Bear and Park, Pandemic are so amazing for learning teamwork skills, because it's play-based, low consequences, but you can start to see and learn those skills.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's that, yeah, you can start practicing those outside of, making large financial decisions if you're an entrepreneur, and just, yeah, and seeing how your decisions affect others, and affect just different scenarios that you move into next. Our kids often don't learn that cascading effect through if and then type of type of things. But board games have a great way of building in the if then and then whatever else that are great because they kind of follow more, especially now the new board games that are out. We play my older children or all my children are adults, but they're all gamers, and so when my husband and I get roped into playing games with them when we get together as a family. And they're complex and kind of push our limits, but it's so fun to just be able to see how these games have evolved to become almost stories in themselves, and to play that out and to work out those scenarios with other people. It's kind of cool. So I see where that's going.
I have a recommendation. If you haven't played it, there's a game called Istanbul, which is an amazing board game. It's really
Oh, we
fun, really
haven't yet.
strategic, and you could spend hours playing this.
Ah, cool. I'm sure my kids know about it already, but I'll have to mention it. Very cool. You talked a little bit about student agency. And can you talk a little bit about, for parents, why that is so important for building skills for a child's future?
So for me, student agency is where the student can make choices themselves independently and have control over their own learning experience, their own learning journey. And in my experience, when the student feels in control of their own destiny, they're more engaged, they're more curious, they're more willing to be involved. And I think it can have a real impact, not just on the learning journey, but also on their own mental health. A lot of the young people that I speak to talk about how not having that control really does impact their mental health negatively. And
Hmm.
when they do have control, they start to feel more confident, more curious. They start to figure out their why. And that's just so powerful. I think I can only imagine how empowering it is, because if you've gone through, education K to 12 and you're being told every step is set out for you, is organized for you, you're then going to expect that the rest of your life is kind of going to be given to you, right? But that's not the
Right.
case. That's not absolutely
Hmm.
not the case. And just having to make decisions, having to sometimes suffer those consequences can be a good thing.
Absolutely. I remember interviewing somebody, I think it was probably a little over a year ago, and they said, we give kids these curriculums and we tell them what to do year after year after year, and then we ask them to make the biggest decision of their life at the end. What do you want to do with it? you know, and it's like no wonder they just, they get so depressed, they're unprepared. Um because they haven't made a decision all their life until this point, and then you ask them, well, what do you want to major in college? What is going to be your career? What are you going to do with your life? They have no idea. They haven't made those even small decisions to be prepared to make a big decision like that.
I mean,
So
I think
yes,
you're
it's so
you're
important.
luckier in the US though. So the US, at least you can have a major and a minor when you go to college. In the UK, it's one subject and you specialize. And I think there are pros and cons to this. But if I think back to my own life, right, working in corporate finance and then becoming a chef, it was
Hmm.
through doing both of those parts that I've developed into who I am, into developing the skills that I have, meeting the people that I know. And there's a really interesting story about a young lady who, at the age of 25, did 25 different jobs in the year to figure out what she wanted to do. And by, I think, job 17 or 18, she already knew and she could figure that out. And I think that's so powerful. Just
Wow.
trying different things. I mean, you have to commit a year to doing this, but I think that would be quite beneficial to a lot of people who feel a bit lost.
Absolutely. Yes. And we don't give our kids those opportunities. I often tell parents when they're homeschooling, the best years are high school, because like with my kids in high school, that was the years they could experiment at
Mhm.
trying all the things that they thought they were going to be good at and then see if it worked or not. My oldest kind of figured it out right away. He loved welding, and and building things. And he thought he wanted to be a welder, went to school for that, but came back and actually he's a biomedical engineer now, but knew he still liked building. So, that was, he was on the right track, just didn't have it pinpointed yet. Um, and so, yeah, and my youngest thought she was going to be a tattoo artist, and then took a year in corporate, or not in corporate, but in just in retail, and just decided that she didn't really always like working with people and being on her feet. And so now she's going to school to be an archivist, but
Cool.
and she loves details. So I mean, that was the thing that stuck with her the whole time, is very detail oriented. And um, but those years through high school was like, try something out, do something different. And because we've done all the basic learning
Hmm.
up through middle school, and now we're kind of preparing you to make a decision for life. And so try things out, and really you can fail all you want while you're at home. And that was the beauty of homeschooling during those years, was that we didn't have to follow a specific um,
Hmm.
path for them. We were just kind of discovering, and that's what I loved about it. But it's very countercultural to getting, all of the typical learning done, which we kind of did too. We threw all that in as they were kind of discovering, but yeah, just so much more important for kind of launching them in a way that they felt confident about their skills and about what they wanted to pursue, and really where they felt called. So
I
it's
think you mentioned something so important, that idea of failing. It's
yeah,
often got negative connotations, especially for a lot of traditional schools students, where there are these high stake exams. But actually, failing is a really important thing. I think it's really powerful, a really great learning opportunity.
yeah,
For our students, we often frame it as just the first steps, first attempt in learning. And when you talk to, I mean, you look at startups, right? They have this mentality of fail fast. And it really tells you a lot about
yeah,
how powerful it is. Not just because it gives you an opportunity to try new things and experiment, but also it helps to build that resilience. You make a mistake,
right.
the ability to bounce back from that is probably as equally important as that learning you have from experimenting.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I I'm a scientist by nature. I have a degree in physics, so I always kind of look at life as an experiment, and so my kids kind of got that from me. But but yeah, I always loved when things would kind of go awry, and then we could ask the question, but why? And so, talk about that reflection a bit, and how parents can build that into conversations, um, when as a learning opportunity from those things versus, just a cut and dry. Well, that didn't work out. How can we actually benefit from that?
I think it really requires you to frame it the right way, to not see it as a mistake, an error, a failure, but to
Right.
create this safe space where it's more of a learning opportunity. And I think part of it is just putting less emphasis on the results. I think the journey itself
Yeah.
is equally important as the destination.
Mhm.
Um, I also think it's about modeling behavior, right? If I've made a mistake, talk about it. And
Yes.
often when I do these one-to-one coaching sessions with my students, I often talk about the failures I've had in life. And it not only makes you more human, more approachable, but also makes it tangible. And they can
Mhm.
start to see, okay, this is what happened. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Um, and I think it's to get to that stage, though, you need to have that trust, that relationship with the other side, right? And it takes
Right.
time. I think sometimes in this day and age, we want immediate satisfaction and gratification, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's not possible. You have to build that relationship. I think some of the practical things that you can do, maybe to implement this stuff at home, is to just ask better questions, to be genuinely curious. When I was coming home from
Right.
school, my dad would say, "How was school?" I was like, "It's great." One word answer, because he wasn't asking me something specific. But if you were
Right.
genuinely curious and you were digging a little bit deeper, then maybe we could have more of a conversation there. Um, I find Socratic questioning actually and those techniques really powerful. It allows
Mm-hmm.
the student to start thinking about different perspectives and maybe questioning their own assumptions there. Um,
Right.
but I think the best thing you can do is just to listen. A lot of the students that we coach, they come to us because they don't have a third space. You know, they're homeschooled, so their parents and the family environment is really one space. Then they have, you know, their social space, which is another, but they don't
Yeah.
have someone who they could trust and talk to about things that maybe they can't speak to their parents about. And I think that's quite a powerful thing when we just sit there and listen, because I don't think they want the
Mm-hmm.
answer. They just want to talk.
Right. Yeah. So much so. And yeah, just another set of ears to kind of, and so many people process auditorily, and so they have to get it out in order to really understand what they're
Mhm.
thinking. And so to just be able to say it and hear themselves saying it, and so just to have somebody who sits and listens, it's just um it's very rare that somebody will take the time for a child to be able to do that, and just but it's how important that is for them to have somebody that they can confide in and listen, like you said. Um,
It's I mean, it's interesting because my wife sometimes will tell me, uh, she told me this once, and I've listened ever since. So she'd come home from a bad day at work and she would tell me something, and I'll immediately think, oh, here's a solution, here's a solution. And one day she just told me, I'm not looking for a solution. I just want to talk and I want you to listen. And that's stayed with me for years because actually it's so true. They just want
yep.
to share.
Hmm. Yeah, I have a friend who calls me, and she's single, and so she's like, "I need to process. You got an ear?" and and so because she just processes auditorily and needs lots of friends. So yeah, and she's taught me the same thing, and what a good lesson to learn, because and I know I process more when I write things out. So we're all different, but to be able to find that, and and to be able to let kids, that's a whole nother skill in itself, to know how you process things, and definitely a skill to take into the future. So you had referenced the World Economics Forum's The Future of Jobs in
Mhm.
2025. What are some of the most essential skills for today's learners as we're moving into, jobs that maybe junior high schoolers right now are going to be kind of entering into in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
It's a great question because we don't know, right? The world is moving at
Right.
such a thing that we just don't know. Um, but I think, and my hypothesis is that in this day and age, in this world where things are increasingly automated and machine-led, AI-driven, the skills that actually make us fundamentally human, skills such as creativity, empathy, leadership, are probably the skills that will become increasingly important. Um, for me personally, I think that technical skills get you in the game, but the human skills are what will help you win it. And
Mm,
it's quite hard because I think education won't intentionally teach you those skills. And it's about you actively seeking out those moments to practice these skills. Um, so for me, education really is about, can we develop the holistic elements of an individual, and can we help these individuals become more empathetic, better communicators, more creative, more playful? And I just think to myself, imagine a world where everyone is, you know, twice as good a communicator, twice as empathetic, twice as curious, much more playful. Wouldn't life just be better for everyone?
right. Absolutely. I think so. But yeah, that would definitely take a change in how we handle life right now. But with those technologies coming about, we have the freedom to do that too.
Mhm.
It's whether or not we are going to embrace that as what we can do best versus
Mhm.
what technology can do best, and to kind of partner again with that. And and I love that too. I love that I can kind of alleviate some of the more mediocre tasks to AI, um, and to allow myself to be more creative in other ways. And so, but it's a balance, and it's learning. I think learning to be a little more human, um, in a world where we become so industrialized, and we're kind of trying to move out of that now, and to think in a whole different way. um, but we have to get our education system out of that mode as well, and really prepare our kids for a lot of change that they're going to go through.
It's interesting because I speak to a lot of educators and teachers and examining boards, and they'll say, "Oh, kids are cheating because they're using AI." But I
Mm,
don't have an issue with that because for me personally, if I was, I think education should mimic the real world, right? And if I was at work and I had to figure out an answer to a question or I had to do something, the first thing I'm going to do is go onto Google, go onto ChatGPT, go onto one of these
right.
tools, right? And I'm going to say, ask a question and then start brainstorming about it. And it's not so much about memorizing certain facts, when the Battle of Hastings was, or, you know, how do I make a pina colada, whatever it is. It's more about actually how do I take that information and apply it. I think those
Right.
skills are what people are looking for and what are more important. So that's what exams and all this sort of, I guess, grading should be focused towards. Can we apply the knowledge that we have and turn that into wisdom?
Yes. Yeah. That's a whole different. And but then then it comes back to how do we measure that? And I think we get so caught up in the measurement
Hmm.
than in the skills that we're establishing, that really you can't measure, other than through just seeing it play out and
Hmm.
work its way out in somebody's life. And those you can't really quantify sometimes ever. And I think we have a hard time coming to terms with, we can call success, you know, just one person's life at a time.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's a very different way to look at establishing those skills and building our kids up. So, so true. Um, so do you have any like day-to-day strategies that parents could use to integrate some of the things that we've been talking about today into their just into how they teach, how do they set up their lessons, approach education? I guess you could take it from any angle.
It's a really good question. I think coming from a educational background and then going to the world of education has given me a different perspective. And the things that I genuinely found that have made my life better is to be more patient, to model behavior, to be more curious, asking good questions and just using Socratic questioning techniques. Having that coaching mindset, I also think is really important. Just being able to listen, embracing the silence, which I know some people find quite difficult, but that silence is often where you can have the biggest difference and the biggest breakthroughs. And the final thing is obviously just not to go in with I'm going to help you solve this mentality, but just creating a safe space for the other side to listen, to speak and allow you to listen. Um, like I said, often the other person on the other side doesn't necessarily want a solution. Um, they probably will feel better figuring it out themselves by using their own agency as opposed to being told this is what you have to do.
That's so true. Yes, we all want to feel like we're contributing. And so, yeah, oftentimes when somebody asks your opinion, they're just they're just asking for confirmation or maybe a little insight to what you shared. I know the people that give me feedback in my life, I appreciate that about them, is that they can help me kind of digest and work out things. And our kids are the same way. And yes, if we can model that well, if we can do that with others in front of them well, and if we can work out things with them, just kind of coaching. I found that my role as a homeschool parent, if I could see it more as a coach versus a disciplinarian or a instructor, things went much better because we had such a close relationship that it was
Hmm.
kind of this back and forth more than it was a top down. I'm feeding you, and let's just come together and share information, and let's see what you can learn from what I have to talk about today. So, but yeah, it changes everything, and it also changes how your kids relate to future employers, um, to just the world around them as they interact with information, data, and learning. And so, I love all these ideas you've been sharing with us. Um, can you talk a little bit more about games and projects and group activities and the concepts of teamwork, leadership, and empathy? Um, just kind of how all of that kind of works together in building those skills that we're really looking for, versus the books and the um, just the typical, I guess, what we would call curriculum. So,
Hmm.
how do those untraditional models, um, how are they much more capable of giving us giving our children the skills that we actually want them to have versus what we've been told will give them, what they need.
Well, I'm sure we've all done this, but reading a self-help book about leadership, communication, relationships, whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily make you a better leader or a better communicator, right?
Right.
You have to practice those techniques and practice those skills. And it kind of goes back to our point earlier, Peggy, about learning by doing, um,
Mhm.
practicing those skills so that it becomes second nature to you. So then actually you start using it more and more. Um, in our classes at CoLab, we notice this. We give our students personal missions every month. And it could be something like, you're the question master, you're the team leader, whatever it is. And we'll give them a phrase, a technique that they can use. And what we find is that giving them that technique, and they'll start using it. It becomes second nature to them. Their fellow teammates, their friends will start using it as well. And it has this real knock-on impact because kids, when they see it successful and it works, they either try and copy it or they'll keep doing it. And
Yeah.
it can be such a game changer, but it's quite simple, right? It's just getting that positive feedback loop. Um, I
Mm.
also think that by doing something, you start to adapt it to your own personality. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's quite funny. Salespeople often get given a script and they will use the same script. But the best salespeople are the people who can adapt it to their own style, make it theirs. It's true for storytelling, it's true for a lot of things, right? And I think that's kind of where the experimentation comes in. Try it, adapt it, try again, adapt it until you find your right solution.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true. Practice makes perfect. That it all goes back to that. You don't learn anything until you use it,
Mhm.
and we have to use it a lot in order to be good at it. There's very few things that we are just naturally good at. I totally get that. But but yeah, and I think we live in a day and age where our kids think that something's going to come easy and they're going to have to work at, adapting, and to seeing people model that and show
Mhm.
them that, yep, this is what we've learned. We're going to tweak it and change it. And, but again, like you talked about, in a safe environment where they can do that, it's powerful to, um, but I would love for you to talk a little bit about CoLab, and because you've been talking a little bit about your program for a while. And in the show notes, I'll also share the video that you shared with me about some of your students talking about their experiences with your program. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your program, Collaboration Laboratory?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of set this up because we wanted to help kids learn the skills they need for life, but in a way that's student-led, that they want to be there as opposed to being forced to be there. And the idea of it is that um, kids from around the world will join a cohort once a week with two live facilitators, and they'll be given an option of three challenges. One's a game, one's a discussion, one's an escape room, and they will decide which ones to do. So they start to develop that student agency, that voice, that confidence in negotiating. They get thrown into the challenge, and we don't tell them how to play it. We tell them the goal, and we let them figure it out. And really, the point of CoLab is that we want young people to develop the skills that they'll need in real life, and is meant to mimic real life, but without the consequences. And what we find is that because it's online and they're behind these avatars, the kids start to be more confident. They start to be more, curious. They start to try different things because the person that's failing is not them; it's the avatar. And you start to
Right.
see huge changes, right? We've had parents message us saying, "My son's more confident. My daughter's using more inclusive language. My daughter's making friends easier." Stuff that actually matters. And I think that's
Yeah.
where it makes all of this really worthwhile. We're doing this because we want to help these kids, and we're not here to replace traditional education and homeschooling. We're there to supplement it and help these kids learn those future-proof skills that we all know they need, but doing it in a way that's kind of fun. And I love it
Right.
where parents have described us as Pokemon meet Sherlock Holmes, and I think that's kind of the biggest badge of honor that we can get, when it is truly fun, and it's about making giving kids the opportunity to control their own learning journey.
Yeah, yeah, and in what easier way to play, and like you said, that kind of anonymity with the avatars, that but yet in a safe environment where people are monitoring and making sure that everything is watched over too. It's kind of comforting to parents as well as the kids, and a safe place to explore and learn. So thank you for providing that for families and all that you do. So yeah, I will definitely share that in the show notes. The link to the Collaboration Laboratory or CoLab, as well as some other information that Alan shared with me for you guys to look at. So well, thank you so much for this discussion. It's been great to talk about play again. I know we haven't spoke about it in a long time on this show, and just how it always reminds me. Just it's you just got to have fun.
Yeah,
Life is too short.
life is
Don't make
too
it
short.
serious.
Exactly.
Absolutely. The kids are there to remind us of that too, I think. So we're never too old to have fun. And I love what you said at the beginning, Alan, too, was, we lose that as we get older, and we shouldn't. We are the ones modeling for our children how to live, and how sad if we forget how to play, because that just teaches them that it's not important. And it is so very, very important.
I mean, Peggy, if I can take on skateboarding at my age, I'm sure that should inspire some of your listeners to start embracing this playfulness and this curiosity.
Absolutely. Yes. If you are not doing anything yourself, definitely be thinking about how can you be a little more playful around your kids. So whether it's sitting in the middle of a pile of Legos, which I remember doing with my children, or donning a costume and running around the house, which I have done as well. So, but it all keeps you young, and it just teaches your kids just how important that is, and how important they are in your life too. we tend to forget that that is their love language, how they play. And if we can get down on the ground and play with them, we can see the world from their perspective a little better as well. So don't forget that. So next week, we are going to talk about alternative educational models. So that's coming up on next week's show. So definitely join us for that. We're going to kind of go outside the box and talk about some ways that you can teach when you think you probably aren't teaching, just like play. So I'm sure it'll be a good continuation of this topic. So you'll want to join us then. But thanks again, Alan. I appreciate you. Definitely check out Alan's website at collaborationlaboratory.com and see if that's a good fit for your student, maybe to start finding ways to build those future skills in some group environments. So we just appreciate the conversation today, Alan, and all that you had to share.
Peggy, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next week here on Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Bye, everybody.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com